I got here by taking risks. I got here by actually following my passion and not necessarily putting a career path or money or kind of anything ahead of just pure curiosity.
Welcome to the Mentor Files. I'm your host, Monica Royer, founder and CEO of Monica and Andy. Join me as I chat with leaders across the fields of entrepreneurship, parenthood, health, and lifestyle. This season, we're digging deeper than ever before to learn the story behind the story. Think of the show as one part Audible MBA and one part certification to be the confident CEO of your own life. Here we go. Please join me in welcoming the wonderful Forever 21 CEO, Winnie Park, to the Mentor Files. When Winnie took the helm of Forever 21 in 2022, the global brand had been majorly relevant for decades. But rather than look back and rest on the brand's laurels, Winnie has helped launch Forever 21 into the future with innovative collaborations and great attention to consumer feedback. Today, Winnie and I speak of her journey, what having an entrepreneurial mindset means to her, and why leading with authenticity is so important. I know you're going to love hearing what Winnie has to say, so let's start the conversation. Winnie, welcome.
Monica, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, well, I am thrilled. And I feel like we talk about business, we talk about motherhood, we talk about all things when we talk, which is great. But if you can tell everybody just a little bit about who you are, Winnie, that would be fantastic.
Okay, so that's always kind of a weird, tricky question, Monica. Who am I? Who am I? I'm still trying to figure that out. So who I am at the core is a single working mom, and I would say my vocation is being a mother to Annabelle, and my avocation has always been fashion, consumer retail. And I've had a long and winding path to the current role at Forever 21. Not a direct path at all, but I would say that I got here by taking risks. I got here by actually following my passion and not necessarily putting a career path or money or kind of anything ahead of just pure curiosity. Am I learning? Do I feel passionate about what I do? And finally, how am I feeling about the people I work with? Because I think you spend as much time with the people you work with as with your own family. And for me, that matters a lot. That matters tremendously. It's just who do I get to learn from, and who do I get to touch, and who in turn shows me something that I could really explore with them.
Incredible. And I think, Winnie, one of the things I've admired the most is just being able to take a step back and have really admired your work ethic. And I want to talk a little bit about like where that came from for you. I think as I have gotten to know you, I really have come so much to admire parents in general, especially moms, just, biased a little bit towards moms. And seeing that here you have this incredible daughter who you have raised and is like now in the very early days of being off to college, and you've managed this really tremendous career at the same time. And we know as moms, like there's always sacrifices on every side as we're doing different things. But I think what I've come to admire so much about you is there's just like a grit to get the job done. And not only that, but you bring this energy and this light to conversations where even with all the things swirling around that must go, through your mind in a day, you always bring like a thoughtful consideration to the answer to the questions that you have for me. And so I was thinking about a little bit about the story of Winnie before Ever 21 and maybe before even Annabelle, and like where that work ethic that you have came from.
Mm. Monica, I have to say that one of the greatest influences in my life was my maternal grandmother. She was able to, so my parents and I immigrated from Korea to the United States when I was 2.5. And actually, our first stop was Chicago, where we spent about a year and a half before we eventually ended up in Tennessee. And I think that, for my parents, this notion of having this amazing opportunity to come to the United States. And it really was, it's the classic Korean American immigrant story of we're coming here for you. We're going to defer gratification in our own lives and our own comfort level so that you can kind of charge forward. And there was a very explicit, we want you to go to the Ivy Leagues. We want you to get a great education, like very explicit. And I heard about that since I was 2. And lo and behold, when I was 10, we were joined by my maternal grandmother, who was widowed when my mom was a year old. And she had been alone in Korea up until that point. And we got this amazing opportunity to apply for a visa. It took us, the good part of, honestly, the decade to get her into the United States. But when she joined, she always role modeled this notion of grit. But she also role modeled for me and showed me what it was to love fashion. She and my mom, when they were living in Korea, would tear, this is the latest Dior outfit. Let's go knock it off at the tailor. Um, Everything from just passion for fashion. Um, she also was a tremendous cook, and her ability to just delight and surprise with Korean cooking that honestly we didn't have the ingredients in Tennessee, so she grew a lot of what we ate when we couldn't find those ingredients. And then I would say the third thing was just her capacity for being just so authentic and real. Her struggles in terms of raising my mom on her own, and actually my parents' struggles as immigrants, really inspired me. And there was, gosh, my dad would work 48-hour shifts as a doctor, and he just never gave up. And I know that so much of that was for me and for my sister. And that is a very strong motivator for not only what you want to aspire to do, but more importantly, what good looks like. And so, I would say it's probably those pieces. It's my family, my grandmother, and being an immigrant.
How old were you, Winnie, when you came to the United States, when you moved here? What age were you?
I was 2.5. And so I was fluent in Korean. I knew no English. When I started preschool, I had to learn English like in earnest. And I learned my English actually from watching TV, from Sesame Street, and watching PBS. And when I got to school, it was interesting because at one point, early days, the teachers actually thought I had a learning disability because I was so quiet. But my quietness really came from a few things, being so self conscious because I was the only Asian person in the school. And I guess, secondly, just learning how to articulate and speak when I was in my brain, I was rapid fire, just trying to assimilate, trying to understand, really just trying to literally understand the language as I went.
Incredible to think about, like, 2.5-year-old Winnie coming here for the first time. So most of your earliest memories then, Winnie, would have been of being here. I assume, like, you don't, being so young, so it wasn't as much that you were already of school age when you came here, but it sounds like there was a big process as you got to actually, because of the difference in language, to getting used to being in a school here and speaking English all of the time.
Absolutely. And, my parents had never stepped outside of Korea. My dad had served with the US forces in Vietnam, out of med school, but outside of that, they had never stepped outside the country. And so while they learned English in school, we spoke Korean at home. And we were very much a family of three until I got to preschool. And and then, I would say, Monica, that the way that we kept the Korean culture very much alive in our household is we ate Korean food every night. We went back to Korea every 3 to 5 years to see our family, because for the family back in Korea, my parents were the first ones, first to ever go to college. And then, secondly, to really step outside and try to make a better life. And a lot of money went back to Korea to support the broader family.
That's an amazing story, Winnie. And I think a lot about sometimes being, my mom came here as an immigrant, very similar to you at an older age, but keeping that culture alive even through additional generations. I feel like that, I also was so close to my maternal grandmother. And I think a lot, even when I went to have my daughter, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like how now that I'm actually having this baby, like how am I gonna, as I got closer to the birth, everyone was so excited. And I thought, well, nobody actually has to do this birth but me. And I was getting pretty nervous. And then I
Mhm.
thought about my grandmother, and I was like, oh my gosh, she had 9 children at home. If she could have 9 children at home, somehow going to make it through at the hospital. Like there's a way that this is all going to happen, but still drawing so much on her resiliency and strength, even though she's gone. And it's kind of amazing when you have that tie. It's almost like that arm that reaches to like a different time and a different place and a different culture, how it binds you together in so many ways. And I think that was, my grandmother was a second grade education. She had the first of her 9 children starting at the age of 12. I think she was like a year younger than my daughter is now. And I often think about that because when I have a hard day, I almost have to recenter myself sometimes to be like, oh my gosh, there's, of these generations that were right before me, there was like a different definition. And it doesn't undermine the hard days that we have here, of course. It's all relative, but it is difficult to think about like all of the, I don't know, the generations that came before you and how you kind of merge those together. Have In terms of Annabelle, has she been able to like, and I think about this all the time with Bella. I know our daughters have very similar names. Like,
Mhm.
will I be able to have that tie to the culture that, that we have? Like, do you feel like it that you've been able to do that for her? Does it get more distant as the generations grow?
It's definitely tougher with Annabelle. And part of it is she is half Caucasian. And what's fascinating to me is that she identifies as Korean. And I think it is because my family, my parents have been such a big part of her life, and have been constantly present, even with distance. My parents remained in Tennessee. Annabelle was born in San Francisco. We moved from San Francisco to Hong Kong, and my parents would visit us in Hong Kong. My mom would spend stretches of 6 weeks in Hong Kong with me and with Annabelle. And so I think a lot of her identity and feeling a connection to Korea has come from that. Also, when we lived in Hong Kong, we took advantage of being close to Korea and visiting and seeing family.
So she had a
And I think that
chance.
makes absolutely. And even when we moved back to the United States, my father planned a tour of the country, and myself, my sister, her family, Annabelle, we all got literally on a tour bus that my dad rented, and we went all through Korea. And it was amazing because I think it's important for him, as he's getting older. It was his wish that his grandkids experience the culture in
And
a
be able to
very
see it.
visceral way. And so all of those pieces have been really fundamental in her identifying with culture. And then finally, we still eat Korean. So she's grown up eating a lot of Korean food. And I would say her taste buds are intrinsically Korean.
I love that. I do feel like food ties you so much to the culture and can help keep the culture so much alive in a different country. And I think that very similarly, Bella was, I was half Indian, to begin with, and she's a quarter. But what I think is so amazing about this next generation is they're so proud of and identify so deeply with their culture. And I think where I even felt as a kid this need to assimilate, to be like everybody else, today with what brands are doing and the inclusivity, the representation that everybody has across cultures, there's so much pride. It feels to me from like just even what I can see in this next generation. And I think Bella takes so much pride in her Indian heritage. And I think it's been so fun to relive it through her eyes in a way that I don't think I even enjoyed or appreciated as much, when I was a kid, because my brother and I were kind of straddling two cultures, and I don't necessarily think we fit in anywhere. And so that was something that I remember not necessarily self-conscious of, but I just felt like the need with whatever culture I was in to kind of like to try to fit in there as much as possible. And I remember thinking, where do I belong? And as I look at her, like she doesn't have any of that.
Right.
And
That's so freeing. I agree with you. I think this generation it's not just an acceptance level, but a pride of what makes you different as opposed to what makes you the same. And you said such a key word, which is assimilation. And I think that assimilation can come in so many different levels. It can come in the place of culture, race. It can come in the place of, I think it's the classic issues around the imposter syndrome. And, you can feel like an imposter because, you know, professionally, you don't think you deserve the position you're in or feel that others are questioning whether or not you're qualified, right? And I just think it's a bit of the human condition. And I feel very good that Gen Z embraces difference,
mhm.
but I know that the imposter syndrome, regardless, is very real, and it's something that it's so funny because as you grow older, you wish you could talk to your younger self.
Definitely. It's interesting that you say that. We had an event maybe a year ago for International Women's Day at Monica and Andy, and we had this incredible group of like really accomplished women and moms, and people were standing up to, kind of introduce themselves. And there was this theme that emerged across the room, which is that everybody felt imposter syndrome and it didn't matter what their position. And I thought
Hmm.
this is so interesting that this dynamic in women, and again, like maybe in men it exists too. I don't, not as familiar from personal experience, but I remember my brother told me something so helpful when I started doing this. He said, Monica, nobody really knows what they're doing. Everybody's kind of faking it. And so
Hmm.
don't feel like you have to know what you're doing. And, I hope that's not like neurosurgeons. I hope there's some people out there that do really know what they're doing. But for the rest of us that aren't clinically trained, it was a really heartwarming thing to hear. And I often think about it as I go into a place. I used to be so afraid to ask a question, thinking, oh, I'm
Hmm.
probably the only person that doesn't know what this is. And it's taken me almost a decade to shed that. But I think you finally get to a point where you try not to care quite as much about what anybody else thinks. But that's a hard thing to do. And I completely agree. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, I think I would definitely, amongst other things, say, be a lot nicer to your mom, Monica, um, to start. But for sure, like, don't be so afraid to try new things because, it's not like anybody really 100% knows what they're doing either.
Absolutely. And I love what you said at first and be kinder to your mom. Um, it's so interesting because I'm watching Annabelle. The teenage years, high school was this moment of, self actualization. She's coming into her own. But there's real, like, mom, I wouldn't call it mom hate, but mom conflict,
Yeah.
and it goes from, you go from having this baby who adores you, worships you, and and it goes both ways. And the sweet relationship to one where conflict kind of fuels the day. And they always said to me, with girls, they come back in their 20s because they realize how much you went through and how appreciated you are and how much they need you.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly felt that. I think when I went off to college was when I looked back and, you know, my mom could barely get me to talk in high school, and then all of a sudden I'm in college, and I'm calling her every day,
Mm-hmm.
and seeking advice, but also a lot of it is just comfort.
Definitely. And it's interesting. I feel like there's been such an evolution of my own relationship with my mom where we've always been incredibly close. If it makes you feel any better now, Winnie, like my parents live directly below us in a condo and there's not like almost a minute. Like a lot of times now it's
Uh,
funny. I'll call my mom and she'll be like, I can't talk. I'm on the other line with Bella, who's like 2 feet away. And I'm like, wait, she's talking to my mom. So like she now
wow.
calls my parents every 2 seconds. So I don't even get as much of a chance to talk to them because she's so busy informing them of everything that we're doing. But I think
Mhm.
it was interesting for my mom and I because, she immigrated here at the age of 19. So she didn't grow up here. And I
Mm.
think if you talk to her, she'd say she was kind of unaware of what we would face growing up here because it was so I think that there was a lot of when I was younger real differences where she couldn't really see around the corner to some of what we would experience in school because
Mm.
she just didn't experience it. She wasn't here. But then I think later in life, to your point, and we were always close, we came so much to be able, to be able to appreciate each other. But I feel like my mom
Absolutely.
and I have been through so much, and there's so much, with my brother's mental health struggles, and like there's a lot like of that has bound us together as a family because in some ways we've just been through so much in a different way that it's like I
Absolutely.
go back to think about 18 before my brother's even like initial diagnosis and I think about his initial mental break when I was maybe 21 and he was 19 and that was before we really knew what it would be, but I
Hmm.
remember like that dynamic and that happening to him like in so many ways for better and worse like changed the trajectory of what the next like 20 years would look like, but we
Mm.
just didn't know it at the time. And I think about how much closer in some ways that made me to my parents
Hmm.
because we were so dependent on each other to like ensure like his health over time. And it's like
Absolutely.
you look back and you don't even realize like there's this immigrant culture that's one part of the overlay. There's all the other struggles that everybody has as a family in different directions. And I think as a mom myself, I mean, you always look back at certain things and you're like, I'm even thinking back to last night when Bella was working on a project and I was like, oh, I wish I'd been like a little bit more calm as we, went through like
Mm.
some of the homework trials and tribulations, but
Mm.
you just try to do the best you can every day and that's kind of all you can do.
Mm. Monica, what I love about you is how real you are about um, some of the real pains and struggles that come with being an authentic human being, like beyond being a professional or whatever you do. It's about the who you are and what shaped you. And, as you talk about your brother and mental health, I grew up in a household where my mom struggled with mental health issues and had serious bouts of depression when I was young. And it resurfaced later in life. I'll never forget, when I was shopping for my wedding dress. It's a business school here in Chicago. And she was just not able to make it out to be part of that or really anything related to my wedding planning because she was suffering from depression and basically had like a flat affect. And I just remember how much that, and I really needed her and loved her so much. And it was so interesting because at the same time, I'm very human. I felt this level of almost resentment of why do you have to be sick when this is this moment that I need you to be here? And and it was like a combination of resentment, worry, um, this cloud of like sadness, but also almost feeling like, come on, let's push through this,
Mhm.
all of those conflicting feelings at a moment where, you know, I was also coming into my own, I was trying to get my MBA. I was confused about what the next steps in my career would could look like, and at the same time, you know, celebrating this moment. And it was very bittersweet and very difficult. And when I'll never forget coming to this conclusion with my dad around what her actual what the actual prognosis of her situation might be, and maybe it's beyond just depression, and looking for different cocktails of medications and drugs to try and stabilize her. And when she came out of it, it was like a whole fog lifted,
Mhm.
and it felt so different to be a family at that point.
You know,
But it's a real tough thing to live through.
you know what it is, and the awareness that we have for it today, Winnie, I completely understand what you're saying. I'm like a very energetic, up early, hyper positive person, and I've suffered from my own bouts of like probably anxiety and depression too. But when you're really dealing with it, I remember with Andy before we really, he got the initial diagnosis, and then he was fine for so long. And honestly, we didn't really believe it. It seemed like bipolar was something where you cycle through a lot of moods, and I was sort of the moody one. I don't remember that being Andy, but the
Mhm.
depression I absolutely remember from him. And I remember thinking, oh, I can coach him out of this. Like, I'd be like, get
Mhm.
up. Like, there's so many great things about your life. And, you should be excited about this and that. And I remember like just being unable to connect to him. But I just didn't
Mhm.
understand depression at the time. I wasn't educated in it. And so I thought, well, maybe he's not eating well or he's not sleeping enough or whatever it was. And I just didn't appreciate how clinical it really was
Mm, mm,
and how much now, as I think about that, I'm like, geez, how did he ever make it through those years? Like, without really having therapy or help for so much of what he went through.
mm,
And I think because we were also this immigrant family, I think we were a little bit, it was just a little bit harder to face. It just, for whatever reason, it
mhm.
didn't seem as embraced as it feels today in like 2024 that you can really, you know, say, hey, I need a mental health day or like here's what's happening. It was just so taboo 20 years ago to be thinking about that stuff.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of shame associated with it, and a lack of understanding. It's also not easy in terms of, there's a course of, if you're diagnosed with, cancer, it is, it, there is a course that you follow. There is a path. And although it is very individualized, there are known kind of remedies and solutions, and I think the mystery of mental health is we're just beginning to tap into what
Mm-hmm.
those remedies are, and greater understanding, much less the taboo and the shame that can be associated with it. Yeah, I'm curious from your perspective. So you were the strong and healthy one, and likewise, like I didn't have the situation with a sibling, but I definitely had it as you know um, you need to be the strong and healthy one because your mom's not doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And how was that for you? Um,
It's interesting you say, I feel like, and I don't know if this is true, that sort of like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Like I feel like everyone's life is different and it's hard to say. But I would say I've worked with this amazing CEO coach and we've interviewed her on the podcast before. And I think the underpinning of my personality is this ruinous empathy, Winnie. And what
mm,
Irene once shared with me is like helping to manage my brother's situation built a grit for me
mhm,
that balanced that empathy that I
mhm,
had. And so as I step away, I think it it made me realize that there was more resilience, like that I could handle more than I thought that I could. And so,
Mhm.
I think about how sometimes these things, and I wish that I could take it away from him. But on the other
Mhm.
hand, and obviously I don't know your mom, but I feel like he wouldn't be as special as he
Mhm.
is. And you know
Mhm.
Andy. Like Andy is like
Mhm.
a light. Anyone, and it's just so funny. I was talking to someone before this. I talked to Andy for the first time, and the pure admiration sometimes that I see on people's faces after they talk to him. And I'm like, no, I get it. He's like a special kid. Um,
Mhm.
and he wouldn't be that special of a kid if it weren't for bipolar. I feel like what the best of us is sometimes like the worst of us too. And so in
Mhm.
some ways I'd love to take away the pain and what we experienced, but I would never take away the affliction because he wouldn't be the special kid that he is if he didn't have it. And I realized it built for me a skill set that I would have never needed to build. And
Mhm.
I didn't know I was building it at the time, right? And I think I'm so close to my mom as it sounds like you are to yours. And my mom was very strong always. And so it wasn't until my brothers, and what does he say? Is you're thinking about cancer. He's like, everyone says I have cancer. Like,
Mhm.
it's not like he is cancer. We're at like mental
Mhm.
health. We're like,
Mhm.
oh, he is bipolar. And it's like, no, he has bipolar, but it's not who he is. And he's taught me
Mhm.
to try to say that in the right way. Um, but I think that was like for me the wall of like my mom was like this beacon of strength, this immigrant. Her dad had died as she was coming here and like she survived so much, but she crumbled with my brother's affliction and she got back
Mhm.
up and stood back up again and everything. But it was the first time in my
Mhm.
life because my parents were such beacons that I
Mhm.
saw them falling apart. And I thought, and my best friend, who was my brother, he's being wheeled away
Mhm.
and like into like this, uh, mental hospital, for lack of a better way to term it. And like for the first time in my life, I was like kind of by myself. Like my parents were there supporting and they never left my side, but they were kind of gone in terms of like they just
Mhm.
couldn't believe
Mhm.
that this was happening.
Mhm.
And so I think it built a strength in me that I don't like I don't think I would have been able to build if not. And in some ways it's almost, and I was talking to Irene about this too, I had that happen like at the same time I was as my brother was like older and things were unfolding. I had like multiple miscarriages, and I was telling Irene recently, I'm like, sometimes I don't know if I let things affect me enough. Where like I'm just like my
Mhm.
mentality now is like, and I mean, with building a business, I'm
Mhm.
always like plan A, B, C, let's get through to the other side. And I'm like, will
Mhm.
this all come like, will someday will I just be like buried under all these like emotions that I never had? I don't know. Like I'm definitely, going to therapy and like talking through all of it too to make sure that that doesn't happen. But, it's interesting how you just like, you kind of have to keep going at certain times.
Mm. I think that what has always been striking for me with you and with Andy is the astonishing level of self-awareness that you possess and self-knowing. And that is this tremendous you are also a beacon and a light. Not only because it's as a leader, having someone who's so relatable, but also that level of consciousness is a gift in any human being. And fostering a relationship with a conscious human being, self aware human being, versus someone who is trying to project perfection or, any number of masks that we put on is, it, you can't even compare the two. And I think that, it's interesting for me because um, I think that so many of us struggle as professionals and as people because we are rewarded for what you can do, what you know, but the question is the who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And the who you are is actually, especially as a leader and as you move up in an organization and as you start a business, the who you are is why people follow you. It's not the what you know. It's not the fact that organic, baby clothes, and you understand, honestly, how to raise capital. It's not what you know or what you do. It's really the who you are. And I do think these experiences shape the who you are more than anything, and especially difficult. I would say it's not just difficult. Like, life is difficult. I always think
Mm-hmm.
about, like, you expect, when we're younger and you watch everything, Hollywood, every fairy tale is about. It's supposed to be happiness interjected by moments of difficulty, when
Mm-hmm.
actually so much of life is difficulty interjected by moments of happiness.
Yes.
And once you
It's
embrace that, you're like, oh, this is okay.
Yes. No, it's so true. You know what? I think we learned so much from my mom. And I mean, my dad is a wonderful, amazing human, but leadership, I think we learned. My mom really led by example. And she always said, like, you have to see like the person behind the person
Yes,
working with you, like whoever's working with you,
yes.
like who's the human behind that. And I think if you can then, and I'm still learning too, like every day it's, something new or different. And I've evolved so much too in doing this. But I think you have to build an awareness a little bit of who you are. And I'm still learning and doing some of that. But once you can understand your own strengths and weaknesses, it gives you a little bit of empathy for everyone dealing with you too.
Oh
To
my
be like,
gosh, yes.
like, oh, here are the qualities that are good about me, but here are the ones that aren't too, or like the things that I could be working on. And like I said about Andy, I've realized our best qualities are also our worst qualities too. And so,
Mm,
I think that's been like a very big learning as a leader, and knowing, and you sit on like the board, it's like when do you assert yourself as a leader versus like listening to the people around you? And it's like
mm,
it's always kind of a dance when you're dealing with so many different personalities and so many different people. And I think that's something I'm still learning and I'm still struggling with, but I think it's a journey. And I think one thing I
mm,
learned from my mom was like, and she had a career, she was busy, but we always felt first no matter
mhm,
what. And so I always
mhm.
think no matter if it's Bella or who, people really do remember how you made them feel
Absolutely.
more than anything. And so I think that all the time. Like, I'm busy, I have a lot going on, but like, does Bella feel like she's the most important thing? And I guess only time will tell if she does or doesn't. But I think that's something I'm, so focused on being able to do. I would be remiss. I mean, I feel like we need like a 3-hour podcast to get through all of this, but what's it been like I mean, bringing all of the life experience you have, like the cultural experience that you have, and like coming to one of the most powerful and incredible brands? Like, I feel like Forever 21 is not just like a brand, it is like ingrained, it's etched in all of our memories. We've all shopped at Forever 21. I remember I was asking about the Forever 41. So that's my branding idea for the future. But
Love it.
in the meantime, it just seems like it's been an incredible experience for you.
It's been incredible. And in fact, it's so funny that you should say Forever 41, because this year we turned 40 as a
I know. So it
brand.
was like, it's perfect.
It's crazy. And if you think about it, I do agree with you. I think I am lucky enough to be a steward of this brand that was born 40 years ago, and that millions and millions of people around the world have, been part of that journey, shopped. And what I think is so amazing about it is that one, was founded by Korean American immigrants in Los
Oh, I didn't
Angeles.
even know that. That's
It
incredible.
was. It was. They
Wow.
started with one store that became five in LA, and their magic was bringing trend product at value prices with immediacy. And they expanded to be, like, a multi-billion-dollar company operating directly in 47 countries around the world. And the classic immigrant story, Horatio Alger at its best. But what is amazing is I joined this team in Los Angeles, and there are so many people I work with who have been there for 30, 25, 15. years. And what really gets them going is this passion for the brand. And I think that the learning for me with Forever 21 is how do you take the best of all of that amazing knowledge that comes from history and these folks who know how to do things in a very specific way. We can deliver trends in 8 weeks from concept to floor. It's incredible. Um, but how do you take that knowledge and how do you blend it with new talent? And I would say overall a cultural change. So much of, I think, founder-led businesses are about the founders, and when the founders aren't around, then it's what are we aiming for? And there's this huge vacuum that is left when founders leave. And so with me, it's kind of having the dialogue around actually your real boss never left the building. Your real boss is actually the customer. Okay. And what we need to do is instead of just focusing on one person making the decisions about the look and feel and the aesthetic, focus on what the customer wants and actually get into this notion of customer intimacy. And for us, our maniacal focus is on the youngest generations because that's what Forever 21 is. You get two $20 bills, your parents set you free, you go to the mall, and you purchase for the first time. And Forever 21 is that place where you can unleash your own purchase power and through self-expression, right? Through fashion. And just focusing right now maniacally on Gen Z. We're going to be on to Alpha soon, but Gen Z is fascinating to me. You know, I believe both of our daughters are part of this generation.
Mm-hmm.
And what is so interesting is some of the stuff we said before, the inclusivity, but the other piece is self-expression. And what I have loved is changing our definition of trend and fashion from what goes down a runway or what Gucci is doing to actually taking a step back and saying, what is the customer talking about?
Mm-hmm.
What is the relevant dialogue that's happening out there in terms of culture? And this generation, millennials are digital natives and Gen Z are social natives.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of their information comes from social media. And instead of looking at that as something scary or different, I think the question is, what can we learn from it? It's a free form of user generated content and information flow. You can learn so much about trends, and it's not just fashion trends, but what's happening with food, what's happening with music. The other thing that I find so empowering about social and how we've been communicating with the customer is creator-led content. And instead of like the old-fashioned fashion campaigns where you cast models and find the shoot, I'm like, let's stop all of that. Let's let the creators create the content. Let's arm them with the best fashion. Let them self-express. They're actually the ones who know the trends better than us. That's what's going to show up in our content, in our feeds. And just turning this notion of we're no longer creators. The customer is the creator and we're along for the ride. And that's been the funnest part of this journey.
That is such a cool way to think about it, Winnie. And as I think about that for what, like, even a lot of that means for our customers, as I feel like wherever our customers are now, everybody, to your point, is consuming the same content. So whereas like
Yes.
years ago, there was, a certain segment of the population that was maybe getting this like high end level of content. And now it's so
Yes.
democratized. We're all open to see, like you said, the same things about fashion, the same things about culture, the same things about food. And I do think it's revolutionizing the way that people think about brands. And
Mm.
whether you're a newer brand like us or whether you're a brand like Forever 21, they're fortunate to have you at the helm because I think thinking about things in a new way is what the new brands and the brands that have been here for a while have to do because the world is evolving so much and you see it so much with these 100-year-old brands where it's going to be
Mhm.
really hard, where it's not possible for their founders to potentially be around anymore. I think about some of the other brands in
Absolutely.
baby and I'm like, wow, there's a changing of the guard that's happening out there. And I think either you're new and you're part of that changing of the guard or you're at an established brand but you're evolving with it, and I think those are the brands that are going to be
Absolutely.
standing strong 10 years from now.
Absolutely. I think that at the end of the day, we're all stewards of the brand, and you as a founder founded and stewarding this brand, this beautiful brand through this period. And I'm lucky enough to be part of that journey with you. But what's really neat is when you step back and what you're really creating beyond product is an emotional connection. People,
Yes.
there is such an abundance of choice. Nobody has to buy, right? And in the old days, you pretty much bought a singular brand, right? You trusted singular brands, especially when it came to baby. And today, customers can actually exercise so much more choice. They have so much more visibility to what that choice is, and they can make conscious decisions around, the provenance of the product. They can make conscious decisions about the emotional connection with the brand. And you can go alongside this emotional journey with them. And so I think there's something really powerful about that. It's also it can be hard to keep up. It changes really fast.
Well, it definitely does. And I have, as a recently somebody that came into the LA Forever 21 when I was out there, I am blown away that you can be more in the Forever 41 category, but still be
Yeah,
shopping Forever 21. So that was my key takeaway. Obviously, not the target customer necessarily, Winnie, but I love the idea that even fashion can span generations now in a way that, like, it probably didn't, 20 or 30 years ago, too, which is kind of amazing.
absolutely. Monica, you are the customer. So we are very intentional. We want to get to know the youngest, but we did change a lot of things at Forever 21. One of them is looking at, just understanding that age is a number
Hmm.
and that really you want to meet the customer for
Hmm.
whatever trend need that they have and whatever wearing occasion. So, the fact that this is Forever 21. I shop at Forever 21 with my daughter who is decades younger than me.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's still relevance there, and we are very conscious of looking at how we make the product differently. We're very conscious of making less. We're very conscious of how it fits the body and acknowledging that we're, embracing the full range of shapes, sizes. Also, frankly, genderless dressing,
Hmm.
like you don't have to be so defined anymore. And I find just as much stuff in the men's department as I do in the women's department. And so breaking some of those bonds of what old retail would tell you you need to be or how you need to shop has been one of the fun parts of Forever 21.
Definitely. I mean, through COVID, retail has been a crazy ride, but to be part of retail in 2024 is a real privilege to be thinking about like what the next generations are going to be looking at, and the evolution of how we're thinking about all things retail is very, very fun to be a part of.
Absolutely. And it's really neat because coming out of COVID, I think people embrace physical experiences, and it's nice for us because we love our digital business, but it's nice to see the stores come back as well.
Oh my gosh. Incredible. Completely agreed. Winnie, this has been fantastic. I mean, we could go on for another hour, but let's do this again. Let's have a part two. But thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you more than anything for just being you and being the mentor and the leader that you are. I continue to learn so much from you every day, and I'm so grateful.
Monica, I am so honored that you consider me a mentor. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. As a female business leader, I'm inspired by Winnie's professional and personal approach. I hope you took away some valuable insights from this discussion as well. And trust me, it's well worth a look at what Forever 21 is doing these days. Check it out by visiting forever21.com or Forever 21 on Instagram. Remember to subscribe to the Mentor Files wherever you listen to podcasts, and your reviews are always deeply appreciated. I'm your host, Monica Royer. See you again soon.